and we'll get started in just a few minutes. All right, I'm going to give it another minute and then we'll get going. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for being with us tonight. I see people are still coming in the virtual door, and so they can join us when they're able. My name is Jennifer Coffey. I am the Executive Director of ANJAC, the Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions. I see a lot of familiar names and some new ones as well, so thank you for being here with us tonight. ANJAC is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to help municipalities, particularly environmental commissions or volunteer municipal officials, make good decisions about the environment for their community. And we are very pleased to have some of the most prominent environmental justice advocates, community leaders here with us tonight to talk about an issue that many of us are eager to assist and be good allies and advocates and want to learn. And we are here to learn from the best tonight. And so it's my great pleasure to have Deputy Director of the DEP, Olivia Glenn, with us, as well as Maria Lopez Nunez from Ironbound and EPA community stakeholder groups, and her resume goes on. And I'm pleased to hand it over to our Board of Trustees member, Vice President Marion McClary, who's also has a very long resume and is a proud professor of biology at FDU. So you see him representing in the back there on his screen. And tonight we're going to talk about what the state is working on, as well as what community activists are working on, and learn what we can all be doing better. And then I want to speak briefly about what ECs can think about in terms of environmental justice. And so Marion, let me turn it over to you so that we can hear from the people we're here tonight to hear from.
Great, thank you so much, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. I'm going to introduce the first speaker and then the other speakers. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will answer them at the end after all the speakers have gone. So not, in between each speaker. So the first one is Olivia Glenn. She serves as Deputy Commissioner to the Commissioner McCabe. She was appointed in July, and she was responsible for prioritizing the advancement of the administration environmental justice and equity goals. Longtime advocate in suing underserved communities, have access to outdoors. She believes every New Jerseyan has the right to experience and enjoy the benefits of nature. She previously led the DEP's Division of Parks and Forestry, serving since 2018 as its director and managing 450,000 acres of natural and historic resources. From 2003 to 2009, she worked as the Division Urban Initiatives and Outreach Coordinator, and subsequently served as special assistant to the DEP Deputy Commissioner. Olivia later was a member of the DEP's Environmental Justice Advisory Council, leading efforts in outreach, education, and land management. There's a few other things I could say too, but I want to get to her as quickly as we can. Everyone, let's welcome Commissioner Olivia Glenn.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Dr. McClary. The most important item in my resume as it pertains to this evening is that I am a fellow environmental commissioner emeritus. So it is always my pleasure to talk to ANJEC and other environmental commissioners because the role that you play is just so deeply important. So I'm going to share a few PowerPoint slides. So if you can bear with me for 1 minute while I do my screen share. And go to the beginning. There we go. Okay. So good evening to everyone again, and thank you so much for having me to be here to be a part of tonight's discussion, whose time has certainly come in the state of New Jersey. Through Governor Murphy's leadership, our state is invested in making change and bettering the environment for those who have shouldered disproportionate pollution for way too long. So I am delighted to be here with each of you, as well as with my distinguished co-panelist, Maria Lopez Nunez. We do a lot of great work together, and I know that she's going to share some really important insights as well. So in New Jersey, we have been hard at work on many fronts to bring environmental justice to our overburdened communities. Our efforts range from the nation's most empowering environmental justice law to guidance via an administrative order on integrating environmental justice into state agency decision-making, to filing legal actions to address pollution problems in environmental justice communities. So the photo that is on my left is when Governor Murphy signed the landmark environmental justice law in September 2020. I'm in that picture, as well as Maria in the brown shirt at Governor Murphy's left shoulder. The photo on the right shows Governor Murphy issuing Environmental Justice Executive Order 23, which he passed in his first 100 days in office back in 2018. The executive order contained several directives, which include the continuation of the Environmental Justice Advisory Council, the establishment of an Environmental Justice Interagency Council to foster a holistic whole of government approach to environmental injustices. And finally, for DEP to serve as the lead agency in the development of a guidance document that marshals the advancement of environmental justice across the entire state's executive branch. That guidance document was completed in fall 2020. And the law, which has its significance, which I will discuss momentarily, is very good, but it's also good to know the larger context in which we're advancing environmental justice efforts in the state. Because certainly the areas where the law does not reach, we intend to address those under the umbrella of the executive order. So when we're talking about environmental justice, what exactly do we mean? To begin with, we start with a threshold of the definition that has been established by the EPA, which is here. And I'm sure that many of you environmental commissioners have seen this definition before. It's been around for quite some time. But the essence of the definition is reaching fair treatment, achieving fair treatment, and facilitating meaningful involvement for all of our communities for those things that we do in terms of the management of the natural resources within those communities. But under the umbrella of what we're trying to advance here in the state of New Jersey, we're trying to take a deeper approach to not just look at fair treatment and meaningful involvement, but to really take a deeper dig and get to some of the underlying systemic challenges that exist. So just want to clarify what environmental justice is and what it is not. So in looking at these three pictures here, we see in the first picture, equality. Equality is that we've provided a crate for everyone. Everyone benefits from the same supports, just as we as a state agency may send an email to every municipality announcing a grant opportunity. We realize that everyone getting an email for every municipality is not the best approach to use because there are sometimes capacity issues in different municipalities. And so we can't just take one approach to do the same thing for everyone. So equality is not what we're striving for. Equity is when we realize that there are different measures needed to ensure that everyone can see the soccer game. Everyone gets the support that they need. So for some, they may need more supports, and now everyone can see the game with the protection of the fence that continues to separate the spectators from the players. So this is definitely a step in the right direction, knowing that sometimes we need to give more supports to some communities than others. But why not take it even a step further to advance justice? In this instance, we know that we need a fence to separate spectators from players. But why does it have to be a wooden fence at all? Why can't it be a cyclone fence that one can see through if they're not tall enough? And that way everyone can see and enjoy the game. And the same thing applies when we're looking at our environmental justice communities and the approach that we're trying to take with the work that we're doing in the department, not just to look at what we do, but also consider how we do it. And some of the systems that may have been in place a long time, like in the two previous pictures, the wooden opaque fence, why exactly do we need it to be a wooden opaque fence? Perhaps something different is necessary. And that's the approach we're trying to take in addressing environmental justice considerations. So in taking it a step further and looking at how we're identifying environmental justice communities, it's identifying those areas that are overburdened, as has been identified in the environmental justice legislation. And we broadly call that communities of concern, as well as communities that have the presence of disproportionate environmental and public health stressors. And in addition to those stressors, what we often find complements that is the lack of or absence of environmental and public health benefits. So we want to make sure that both of those issues are addressed. And we know that when we see those clusters of challenges, we know that we have identified environmental justice communities that need us to take that deeper look at how we go about doing the business that we do under the umbrella of the executive order, but certainly even more so as we're looking at those considerations that fall under the law. So when we look at the environmental justice law itself, there are just several components that I want to raise. First is the facilities and permits covered. Second is the requirements for DEP and applicants. 3 is to identify some of the limitations. And then finally, tonight, to just work with you all to identify overburdened communities in case you are unsure if the municipality in which you are a commissioner has overburdened communities within its borders. So in terms of the facilities and permits covered, to understand the law, we need to first understand where and how it applies. So we look at this with a 3-pronged test of applicability. The first is the facility in question, one of the 8 types of facilities listed in the bill. And those facility types range from major sources of air pollution, such as power plants and cogeneration facilities, to large sewage treatment plants, scrap metal facilities, landfills, and medical waste incinerators, except those that attend hospitals and universities, just by way of a few examples. Second is if that facility is seeking one of a subset of environmental permits, including solid waste and recycling, development permits such as wetlands, CAFRA, or flood hazard permits, water supply and pollution, air pollution, and pesticide permits. So it's important to note here that the bill excludes authorizations or approvals necessary to perform remediation or minor modification to major source air permits that do not increase emissions. And then finally, to understand if the law is applicable, it's knowing if it's located within the boundaries of an overburdened community. So next, it's looking at how does the law work? Along with its permit application to DEP for a covered facility and an affected block group, an applicant would have to complete an environmental justice impact statement that identifies existing public health and environmental stressors in the community. And a part of what we've been at work doing through the rulemaking process is to identify what some of those stressors are. And we've done that work in partnership with our stakeholders, as well as seeking support from academic institutions around the country. Subject to the criteria that will be developed with the input of stakeholders, DEP will assess whether pollution from the facility would create a disproportionate impact on the local community by imposing additional stressors. DEP will assess whether through adding appropriate pollution controls that address localized impacts if the facility can avoid imposing a disproportionate public health or environmental impact. Where there is no disproportionate impact, or where pollution controls will resolve such an impact, the DEP would issue the required permit. Even where some disproportionate impact may result, the bill requires DEP to consider whether the application should still be granted where the project would serve a compelling public interest. So in terms of limitations, it is important to note that the bill does not require an absolute denial of environmental permits for new facilities. It requires an analysis of localized public health and environmental impacts and efforts to avoid those impacts. Only where those impacts represent a disproportionate burden is DEP permitted to deny an application. The bill does not allow DEP to deny facility expansions or permit renewals. If disproportionate impacts are present, DEP is empowered to add additional conditions to a permit to address those impacts. And the final limitation, just to note to everyone, is that this law does not go into effect until the rules are adopted. And we anticipate that the adoption will take place in early 2022. And what we're aiming to do right now is to have a draft of the rules in a register, the New Jersey Register, sometime this fall. And in a few slides, I'm going to just show you visually just how we've gone about identifying overburdened communities. So for our stakeholder process, this is just a recap of the meetings that we held over the course of 8 months. And on the days that we had these stakeholder meetings, in the morning, we met with business and industry during the workday. And in the evening, we met with environmental justice advocates, environmentalists, social organizations, and individuals from communities. And in addition to these public stakeholder meetings, we also held a webinar with municipalities. And if there are any environmental commissioners who would be interested in seeing that webinar, we do have a recording of it on our DEP, Office of Environmental Justice website. I have the URL in one of the slides coming up, so just get your pencil ready, and you can be ready to take note of what that URL is, and you can visit that webinar online for yourself. And in addition, in the spirit of not treating everyone the same way, not just environmental equality, we also did special outreach to the Urban Mayors Association and spoke with them at one of their meetings to talk to them about where we are with the environmental justice law, the identification of overburdened communities, and our rulemaking process. So this is just giving an overview of some of the components of the law if you have not seen this before. So the environmental justice law recognizes that because environmental standards are often formulated based on the effect pollution has upon general populations spread over wide geographic areas, existing environmental laws fail to fully consider the impacts that certain pollution generating facilities have on localized communities. And this failure has created pockets of high pollution across New Jersey, where many pollution generating facilities have become concentrated in predominantly minority and low-income communities that may lack the financial and political power to shape their local landscape and avoid disproportionate adverse impacts on their public health and the environment. So these are just some clauses that are found within the law that are just their statements articulating their position, that all New Jersey residents, regardless of their income, race, ethnicity, color, or national origin, deserve to live, work, and recreate in a clean and healthy environment. And we know that New Jersey's low-income communities and communities of color have experienced disproportionately high number of environmental and public health stressors known to come from a suite of facilities located within those communities. And we know that we need to do something very powerful to just work against this legacy of siting that has happened in these communities. And it's our most vulnerable residents who experience the most injustice. Further within the law, they note that there is no community that should bear a disproportionate share of these adverse environmental burdens. And that we know that this also impacts the state's economic growth. And it's one of the things I like to really underscore. Environmental justice communities want economic development. They just do not want economic development at the expense of their health or their quality of life. So it's looking to have economic development that achieves a triple bottom line of social, economic, and environmental benefits for the communities. And this is the paradigm shift that we're looking to bring with the advancement of this law. So further within the law, we want to give the state's overburdened communities a meaningful opportunity to participate in this process, and looking at the activities that are provided by these facilities that we know cause environmental and public health stressors, allow them to have a say on how things shape moving forward. And that it's in the state's public interest where appropriate to limit the future planning and expansion of such facilities in overburdened communities. So this is just specifically, so you have a written list in front of you, the 8 types of facilities. I know I went over a few before, but this is the full list available here. And later on, I will share a link to our Office of Environmental Justice website where you can get a copy of the law, of the executive order, of the guidance document, as well as recordings from some of our past meetings. So you can hear in more detail how we talked about the different subjects. And so here we have a definition of what overburdened communities are within the law. So a community block group on a block group level has to meet one of these 3 criteria. For low income, it has to be at least 35% of the households qualify as low income, or the block group is at least 40% minority or members of a state recognized tribal community, or 40% of the households have limited English proficiency. So you can see the legend that is here with the color coding that shows you where the block groups are in the state that meet 1, 2, or all 3 criteria. So for our state with 565 municipalities, there are 331 municipalities that have overburdened communities within their borders. And so I will note to you here that the presence of an overburdened community block group does not mean that the designation applies to the entire municipality. It only applies to the block group within the municipality. So in some places, like the city of Camden, for example, every block group is an overburdened community. But there are other municipalities where there may only be 1 or only a handful of block groups within that municipality that are overburdened communities. So this law applies if that facility is being cited in that overburdened community block group, not for the whole municipality. So here is the URL I've been promising, nj.gov/dep/ej/communities.html. And on that website is where you can find this map, as well as some tools that are available there. The first is an Excel spreadsheet where you can pretty much see the primary source data that went into creating these maps. The second is an interactive mapping tool where you can literally type in an address and see if it falls within the boundaries of an overburdened community. Next is that we have a link where you can access a PDF map of every municipality. Next, there's also a downloadable GIS layer. If that is something that you like to do, if you like to play with ArcGIS, we wanted you to be able to do that. But it's also really good for municipalities, planners, developers, and others to be able to take that data and help them make sound decisions. We also have some frequently asked questions and some technical notes and other resources. And amongst the materials that are available there on this URL is the link for when we had the webinar for the municipalities. You can access it there. So I just wanted to show you briefly how the mapping tool works. So you can see here, it's a lot going on here, but I'm going to help you decipher. You can see on the top left, we put in Trenton, New Jersey as the municipality. And what is highlighted here are the block groups within the city of Trenton that have been identified as overburdened communities. And the color coding notes why it has that determination. So in addition to seeing that on a zoomed out kind of level, you can also click on a block group. And when you click on the block group, this pop-up box here that says 1 of 2 at the top, and then it says overburden community criteria met for low income and minority. It tells you the exact indicators as to why it was selected for being identified as an overburdened community. Okay, and so our next steps at this point, we finished our last stakeholder meeting in advance of the rulemaking on June 24th. And so right now we have a rule team that is working very rigorously to make sure that we get those draft rules available in the register this fall. In addition to that, our department is also hard at work working on environmental justice initial assessments, whereby we've had every program area take a deeper dive to look at the work that they do and how they do it, to see if they can foster greater environmental justice into everything that they do, even from the permit review, all the way down to the criteria that we set for grant applications, looking at cost sharing considerations for municipalities that are highly distressed, and a whole suite of other considerations, just so that we can do better work to serve New Jersey's overburdened communities. So please stay tuned for our continued efforts in this regard. And that's all I have for today. That's our Office of Environmental Justice website if you just want to peruse everything it is that we're doing there. And my contact information is on the bottom right. So I look forward to answering any questions anyone has at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Glenn. You can give her a virtual hand clap if you're able to do it. We'll now move on to our next speaker, Maria Lopez Nunez. She is the Deputy Director for Advocacy and Organizing at the Ironbound Community Corporation and member of the Climate Justice Alliance, Right to City, Grassroots, Global Alliance, Global Justice, and along with Dr. Sheets, was recently appointed to the White House Environmental Justice Advocacy Advisory Council. Maria also played an integral role in passing of the Cumulative Impact Bill in New Jersey. And additionally, she's facilitated the passing of the Right to Counsel in New York City and a Civilian Complaint Review Board, which was a national model for police accountability. So at this time, welcome Maria Lopez Nunez.
Thank you. I'm always like, what is there to say on the EJ law? But living in the Ironbound, right? Living in the Ironbound in Newark, New Jersey, I'll just describe our community because I think it's clear then I like to say it's clear to a 4-year-old why we needed the cumulative impacts law, right? In the Ironbound, so the Ironbound, the neighborhood in Newark, I know a lot of folks know about it because of the Portuguese food, but it's more than those 5 blocks. It's actually a 4 square mile neighborhood, and it has a population of 66,000 people, right? We're one of the more densely populated areas. I think New Jersey's average is 1,000 per square mile, right? So we're obviously far exceeding that. In our neighborhood, so I'm just going to talk about in our neighborhood, not even the surrounding area, we have the country's longest Superfund site, which is the Passaic River. It is a 17-mile Superfund site. There might be municipalities on board on the call who are touched by the Passaic River, right? So it was declared a Superfund site, the strongest designation of contamination. We have the state's largest garbage incinerator, Covanta. We have the state's largest waste sewage treatment facility, right? And so what this is like open pits of raw sewage that are like Olympic-sized swimming pools that go down as far as the eye can see. We also have a fat rendering plant. So if you are wondering what that is, that's where they boil carcasses so the fat separates from the bone in order to make a lot of products, right? From gummy bears to makeup, lotion, you name it. It probably has some component from that fat rendering process. We also have 2 power plants, right? Like a lot of folks don't have one power plant. They don't know where the nearest power plant is. We have 2 of them in our neighborhood. We have Newark Cogeneration and Newark Energy Center. We also have over 100 brownfield sites. I know a lot of y'all might deal with that in your municipality. And we're right next to the Port of Newark, right? Which is, when you think of the Port of Newark, it's where 80% of the consumer goods in the tri-state area, they come through that port. And then most of them get on a truck because it's such a short mileage from the port to where they're going. And of course, if they're going to get on a heavy duty diesel truck, they kind of have to go through the Ironbound or through the southward of the city of Newark, right? Because we are, in that way, the backbone of the region. So when you think about all these things together, this concentration of toxicity in one neighborhood, that's where you come to why we needed the cumulative impacts law. Because before the cumulative impacts law, the DEP's permitting process could not see the whole picture. They could only see, I like to think it's a very American thing, right? Every facility by their own, like, individualistic. You know, like, what is that facility doing in terms of its air emissions? You know, like, what's it going to contribute by itself as an individual, devoid of all community context? And for communities like ours, like in the Ironbound, you know, ICC has been around for 50 years. We've been fighting industry most of those 50 years. And it started happening because things in our neighborhood were actually blowing up because of mismanagement of industry, and they were blowing up near elementary schools. So for us in our organization, our community, it was important to be able to allow the law to just finally be able to put a context behind a permit application to understand all the things that are present around where the facility wants to build. They're not in isolation, you know. So we recently had a challenge that would be great if it was happening a couple months afterwards, right? But I think it's a good case study of the intersection of when the law will apply. Hopefully it'll take care of these things, but why zoning matters. And it was a sludge facility that would process, I think, 480 tons a day of sludge, right, from the sewage treatment facility. It would, like, dry it up and make it into something that they sell to someone else. I don't care about the process so much as, like, not in our neighborhood, and not because of we're not, like, misguided, not in our backyard people. We're just, like, suffocating from the air pollution. You know, like, in the summer, you can pick your favorite bad smell, right? Like, does it smell like animal carcass waste? Does it smell like that chemically sweet smell because they seem like they put a chemical covering over whatever it is that they're doing on? You know, and anyone in the Ironbound or even in the city of Newark that you ask, they have a favorite bad smell, right? Like, I'd rather smell this over that. It's hard to see right now. Obviously, we're seeing the impacts of the big fires in California, right? It's like the whole city's hazy. New York City's hazy. Everything is hazy in the Northeast from what's happening in California. But in places and communities throughout New Jersey, there are neighborhoods where we put a toxic industry and we've just concentrated. And unfortunately, New Jersey is guilty, because you could plot it on the map, that the more the concentration of pollution goes up, the higher the chances that it is people of color, right, Black and brown people, who live in those neighborhoods, or it's low income folks. So we've definitely created a segregation of a nice place to live, that is free of pollution, that is a green space, good water, healthy air, and places that look like the Ironbound, that have a beautiful community that wants to struggle and fight, but who have been punished, right, by environmental racism that has happened over decades. So that's what we sought to solve with the cumulative impacts law. It is not over, like I said, because all it does is, in that permitting process, there's so much that could be done through the zoning of your city. That's how we're actually challenging our sludge facility. It was because of things and advocacy that we did 10 years ago. So if you're environmental commissions, I hope that when you're a part of any stakeholder process to develop zoning plans for your municipality, that you really think about what do you not want, and especially in the neighborhoods that have already been, you know, we say sacrifice, because a lot of folks, especially we saw this during COVID, right, of the disproportionate impact in communities that were also environmental justice communities, and impacts to people who already had asthma, who might have environmentally caused asthma, right? It's not necessarily present in the whole family line, but it's about where they live and the air that they have to breathe. So I'm hoping that part of making justice right is a good full implementation of the environmental justice law, which when I explain it to the kids at the garden, they're always perplexed that the law is only now seeing what they can see when they stand on the corner, outside of their elementary school. And I'm really excited that New Jersey is leading the way, but it also scares me that it's just New Jersey leading the way right now, right? Like we need this throughout the whole country. And the way that we actually passed it in New Jersey is that we teamed up also with a lot of members who are now on environmental commission, and we got it passed in Newark. Newark was the first city in the country who had the cumulative impacts ordinance passed, right? And so that was a bottom up approach. So what you do in your municipality can make a difference in the state further down the line, because sometimes people are afraid to go where no one's gone before. So if you can push your municipality to do better, you'll be an example for others. So I want to keep it short because I definitely want to get to questions and answers. And I'm so glad to be on here with the Deputy Commissioner, Miss Olivia, because she is amazing and has really changed the way that even the stakeholder process has happened and given environmental justice communities a voice like we have not had before. So thank you for that, Olivia.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Maria, and everyone. Let's thank her. And our last and third speaker for today, third but definitely not least, is Jennifer Coffey. She joined the Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions, ANJEC, in July of 2014 as executive director. Jennifer serves as the member of the New Jersey State Water Supply Advisory Council and as advisor to New Jersey State Clean Water Council. She serves as a member of the Hamilton Township and Mercer County Planning Board and on the advisory board for the School of Conservation, and as a member of the New Jersey Society of Women Environmental Professionals. Jennifer has also been nominated by Governor Murphy to serve in the Pinelands Commission with a senatorial confirmation pending. So there's more I could say, but she wanted me to keep it short. She didn't even want me to say that much, but we have extra time thanks to Maria. So let's welcome Jennifer Coffey.
Thank you, Marian, and thank you so much, Olivia and Maria. I'm going to keep it short. I wanted to just share a personal story before I share a few slides that I have. Maria, I think it's really enlightening that you said everybody in the Ironbound has their favorite worst smell, and that a 4-year-old can see what's happening, because when I was growing up in Philly, I had a least favorite smell, and it was a combination in the summer of, smog, combined overflow from combined sewers, from stormwater and sewage water, and the neighborhood chemical manufacturing plant. And the neighborhood chemical manufacturing plant was my least favorite smell because it always triggered my asthma, which my inhaler is never far from me. And so at 4 years old, it became clear to me that people pay attention to politicians on TV. Now, mind you, I was 4 at the time. So I thought, I've got to grow up and become president to tell the polluters to stop it. And so I want to thank Maria, who has taken that to make it happen for neighborhoods that have least favorite smells still to this day in 2021. And what I'm talking about is back in the 70s and early 80s. And we've got so much further to go, and so far that we could have come already. And so I am extraordinarily pleased to be in New Jersey, where we are leading the way. And I want to talk briefly about and acknowledge the amazing work that Olivia and her team is doing at the state level. I cannot say enough good things about that DEP website, so go ahead and check that out. I also cannot say enough good things about the film Sacrifice Zone. If you have not seen it, about the Ironbound community and the overburden of pollution, please go find it and watch it. I want to challenge you as environmental commissioners to understand what the state is doing in leading the way on environmental justice and overburden of pollution that Black, Brown, minority, English as second language speaking low-income communities are suffering more pollution than their surrounding wealthier, whiter communities. And challenge yourself to look at your municipality and what are you doing at the local level. And we at ANJEC will continue to challenge ourselves and listen to leaders like Olivia and Maria and others, because there's there's a lot the state can do, but there's only so much that the state can do. We know as environmental commissioners that so very many decisions are made at the local level regarding land use and pollution and flooding and climate change and on and on and on. So some of these slides may look familiar to those of you who've attended this year's EC Powers Fundamentals course back in March. And that still lives, the fuller version of this, the hour-long presentation lives on YouTube. So go ahead and check out ANJAC Views at YouTube. ECs serve in an advisory role. So whether you're an environmental commission or an environmental committee, your role is advisory. At ANJAC, we would like to work and are starting to work to increase the powers of environmental commissions. Right now, ECs are optional in New Jersey, so not every municipality has to have one. We're proud that about 300 of the 565 municipalities in the state do have ECs, but gone is the time when considering the environment is optional in New Jersey. It should now be a mandatory requirement with authority associated with ECs. But as we stand right now, we're in an advisory role. The law requires terms, you to adhere to open public meetings, annual report, index of open space lands. It's pretty basic, but let's talk about open space and let's talk about the other things that ECs can do, not necessarily required, but can do. You can make recommendations on water, air, waste, noise, etc. in your town. You are required to maintain an open space index. That is the role of environmental commissions. I know it's often delegated to open space committees. But the EC should at least have a liaison there. So I would challenge you to really look at the new environmental justice law and take a look at the website that Olivia mentioned, and maybe we can, we'll send that out to you when we send out a recap of this, this webinar, because that will help you understand which census tracts, so which blocks are identified as overburdened communities within your municipality. And then you can go ahead and look at where are you preserving open space in your municipality. There's a great tool, and we have webinars every so often about it, called Conservation Blueprint, NJMAP 2. You can go ahead and check that out, where you can pull up the GIS layers and look at open space preservation in your town juxtaposed to the overburdened communities. You can also look at zoning in your town. So where are the industrial uses? Where are the commercial zones? And are they mostly in the minority, low income, English as second language speaking census tracts, the overburdened communities? And so start to think at a fundamental level and integrate the cross-examination, if you will, of the decisions that your municipality has always made. Well, that's always been that zone. And look at where the overburdened communities are located and start to question those decisions. This is not going to be easy. You may need to start with some education. Feel free to go ahead and throw your municipal officials over our way at ANJAC. We'll be holding lots of these forums, lots of these sessions, talking about what is environmental justice. How did we come to a point where we are struggling with advancing environmental justice? So to break down the conversations about systemic racism and institutional racism that led us to where we are right now. And so you may need to start with education and then start to question those decisions. You can also look at your ERI and your NRI, your environmental resources inventory and your natural resources inventory. You know, at ANJAC, we are big proponents of keeping that ERI and that NRI up to date because, as I say, Joni Mitchell taught us, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And so you can't possibly advocate for the protection of environmental resources in your municipality unless you know that you have them. And so keeping that ERI, NRI up to date, I would advocate for looking at the overburdened communities map that the DEP has published. And there's, if you're not into GIS, which I mean, I learned ArcGIS 1 years and years and years ago, so I'm not so good at it anymore. But they've got Excel sheets and tables, and you can pull the data up in whatever way that you're comfortable with it, and include reference to the overburdened communities in your ERI. So make mention of them, get them into your municipal documents so that there starts being cross-examination of goals to advance environmental justice. Pay particular attention to the attributes that the overburdened communities have. Speak to members of the community. Often there is a divide, not always, but sometimes there is a divide between those who are in power or influence and those who are in overburdened communities, low income, English second language speaking. There are barriers of time, language, access. And so really focus on building relationships. This isn't going to happen in 6 months or a year or 2 years. This is long-term hard work. I want to challenge you to think about integrating decisions on everything you do, stormwater, climate change, and look through the lens of overburdened communities, look to engage overburdened communities, look to reduce pollution in neighborhoods where there is excess pollution, and make more equitable decisions. There are lots of opportunities for doing that when you are identifying areas for green infrastructure work, project work, remediation work, not talking about chemically contaminated, but areas that are flooding. Look at for the communities, and there are only about 21 or 23, maybe Olivia can help me, communities in New Jersey, I think it's 21, that have CSOs, so combined sewer overflows. And look at sponsoring projects. If you're an environmental commission, creating networks, liaisons, communication with communities, overburdened communities that are often, as I've heard Maria and Dr. Nikki Sheets often say, first and worst hit. And so look at creating partnerships in areas where you may not have traditional partnerships, and plan projects that are nominated by communities. I want to emphasize that there's a long trajectory, decades of well-meaning white allies coming forward and saying, we're here to help. And if you're from a nonprofit, you often have grant money, which is great, that you can throw at a problem or dedicate to a problem. But when that grant accomplishment is finalized, those groups and those efforts and that commitment often vaporize. And so look at making sustained, impactful, long-term commitments and listen to communities rather than dropping in and saying, here's your problem and here's how you can fix it. Listen, 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 listen. These relationships are going to take time to build, and they can be amazing when you find ways to be a supportive ally. We are really proud of the work that we have done in lots of places, but these photos are from our work with the newly formed Patterson Environmental Commission, and they have done a lot of work on, it's really great artwork down here on painting, stenciling their storm drains. They've got a pretty sophisticated data sheet for logging, for cleaning out storm drains. They've got an alert system for when rain is coming to go out and have their storm drain monitors go out and clean up systems to avoid localized flooding and try to avoid the impact of those combined sewer overflows. And at ANJAC, we're here to help. We're also here to learn and to listen. And we are still mostly working at home. We've got some people in the office. So here we are with our laptops and our kitties and our puppies doing our thing. And go ahead and email us at info@anjac.org. There are multiple staff that monitor that email address and get your questions to those of us who can help you. If we don't know the answer, then because we've been around for 52 years, we generally know where to go to get the answer. And so we will, tap into the brilliant minds of people like Maria and Olivia and who they tell us to go and talk to. So if you've got questions, ask us and we'll hunt down the answers for you, brainstorm strategy sessions, etc. So I see we've got some questions in the Q&A. That's all I've got today. Let me stop sharing and I'm gonna turn the helm over to Marion. Mary, maybe we can start to go through some of the questions that are listed in the Q&A. So I think we've disabled the chat for everybody but panelists, but if you've got more questions, go ahead and pop them in the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. If you're not familiar with Zoom, I know most people are, if you just scroll your cursor over the bottom of your screen, you'll have a little pop-up and you'll see 2 conversation bubbles and it says Q&A, and you can go ahead and type what you'd like to ask us in there. So Marion, all you.
Okay, just get myself together. I first want to thank the speakers for staying on the time. I didn't have to cut anyone off. You just kept it short. And so now we have time for questions that are starting to roll in. I'm gonna do them in the order they received. They did receive them in during each speaker, but any speaker can answer it. And maybe if you want to tag team, that's fine. The first one is, how does the EJ initiative impact affordable housing obligations? That is, what happens when the special master insists on increased housing in an already impacted community? So anyone of the panelists or several of you would like to answer that one? I can state it again. It's like 2 parts. The first part again was, how does the EJ initiative impact affordable housing obligations? Let's just stop with that one. There's another question. Well, it was a rephrasing of that.
So I can start with that.
Okay.
And I'll note that any consideration for affordable housing would fall under the auspices of the Department of Community Affairs. And all agencies have been charged to develop initial assessments and action plans, but the DEP is the only department who is undertaking it at this time. We are leading the way for other departments and agencies. So I will tell you that there has been nothing that has been determined as of yet that has been refined for affordable housing based on the Environmental Justice Executive Order. And at the appropriate time, if there are any modifications to be made, I will make sure that my appropriate colleague at the Department of Community Affairs can speak to why they think those modifications would be necessary.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question, just getting, because the more have come in, and so I'm like basically taking pictures of them as they come in. All right, let me make sure this is the next one. Yes, all right. I'm on the environmental committee in Parsippany. How can we best help support environmental justice in communities such as the Ironbound section? And then it was a compliment to Maria for representing her town well. So that wasn't a question, but just a compliment. So yeah, what can someone in Parsippany do to support? And I guess it's more directly to you, Maria. Yeah.
Yeah, in Parsippany. So, I appreciate the wanting solidarity. I always say, look for your closest environmental justice community. The Ironbound's just a terrible example, right, of environmental justice community, but we're not the only ones in New Jersey. So please look, you probably have a neighboring community that's closer and that doesn't have as much. They don't have an Ironbound Community Corporation, unfortunately. I wish that all communities had a really strong rooted organization that can help defend them, but they don't. So please look to see who's doing that good work. But one way you can actually support us, that supports us all, is looking into how your waste is dealt with. Because right now our incinerator actually gets trash from many, many more municipalities. I forget the number, but it's above 20 other municipalities in New Jersey. But most of it is coming from New York, so it's not actually New Jersey folks we're worried about. But every little bit we can do to clean up each of our municipalities goes a long way. We do have to make our way to zero waste. Thank you.
Just a follow up with that. So once someone finds out where their waste is going, what would be the next step?
Yeah, I love that we signed a food waste bill in New Jersey that I know a lot of y'all also had a lot to do with, and it helps promote composting industry, right? Which is a new industry that I am, there's a lot of industry I don't want in my neighborhood. I would like municipal level, I don't want nothing industrial size, but I would like a municipal level composting facilities, because I think it's they're labor intensive. And they're a way to make, I'm not going to go on a whole different tangent, but a regenerative cycle as opposed to an exploitative one where we do things, we burn it. I know that they say they make electricity from it, but it's still more expensive than coal. That doesn't add up for me. And there's better things we can do with our waste, right? And that's taking all the food solids out so we can make dirt. And to me, that's a good cycle. Keep it green on all sides.
Thank you so much. The next question.
I would just add, I completely support everything that Maria just said. I would just add that if if you take a look at the overburden communities map or data sheets that DEP has put together, there are over 3,000 census tracts identified in New Jersey as overburden. And so I would, if you are one of the municipalities who does not have a census block or a census tract identified, take a look at what your zoning looks like on the edges of your municipality and your surrounding municipalities. And are there overburden communities identified in neighboring municipalities, and what does your zoning look like on that border? And so I would look at home first. And as Maria said, I absolutely the solidarity is great, and keep your eye out for, the larger action alerts and whatnot that Environmental Justice Alliance, Ironbound, others put out. But, take a look at home, and we can help you brainstorm through that. And we're hoping to have a session in Environmental Congress where we can start getting into where municipalities can chat with each other, and we can figure this out together.
Right. Thank you. There was a question about the film, the name of the film, and then the word sacrifice was in it. And someone asked what was the name of that film. I guess they wanted to look it up. I think you mentioned it, Maria. Maybe you mentioned
Yes,
it.
I shared the link with everybody. It's called the Sacrifice Zone, and I did share a link in the Q&A, and we will share that with everybody in the email following the session.
Great, thank you.
But it's the Sacrifice Zone. If you Google it, you'll be able to find it.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks, Marian.
No, you're welcome, Liz. Thank you. Here's the next question. What do you say to those persons who will and maybe already have objected to the EJ law as too expensive to comply with, or that it even represents reverse discrimination of some sort?
I could take this because we dealt with so much of that as we were getting it passed. The EJ law took 12 years, okay? It wasn't an overnight success. Took 12 years of struggle. And when folks are saying it's reverse discrimination, like we are trying to reverse discrimination, like it is, let me just be clear. We're trying to reverse discrimination because discrimination has already happened. That's how you end up with majority Black and brown communities that have all the toxic waste facilities. That's why I can walk to an incinerator. Like that's not a casual walk. Oh, I can walk to the neighborhood garbage incinerator, to the sewage swimming pools, that's not casual. That's not incidental. We're trying to actually, this isn't even justice. We're not even getting to justice. We're just trying to be fair. And I'll remind everyone, when people say it's too expensive to comply with, all it is extra scrutiny. It doesn't mean an automatic denial. All it just means is we're trying to be a little more protective, because clearly these folks in these census blocks have already been dumped on, So like, if you're an EJ community, but somehow maybe you don't have industry, you're okay. Like maybe this industry is not that bad and it'll get its permit. But maybe you're coming to the Ironbound where we're overloaded, and you're going to contribute to that disproportionate pollution. And then that's a no, so it's not about it being expensive, because all it is extra eyes to make sure we're protecting public health and trying to change the bad trend of discrimination that has happened for decades.
Amen. I think one of the things I also pivot to in having that conversation, and it's not infrequent that question comes up, is it's too expensive not to do this. And so start thinking about increased asthma rates, increased medical costs, increased loss of time at work, increased loss of time at school. And you start adding up real impacts to communities that are also largely underemployed or unemployed. You've got unemployed members, because you're talking about a large sector of these overburdened communities are identified as low income. And so you are putting an additional burden on an already burdened community so that surrounding areas don't have to have the burden of that pollution. The way we live creates pollution, period. If we want to end that, we have to start living in different ways. And we have been blind for a very long time to the impacts of Black, brown, low-income English as second language speaking communities when we are white and wealthier and more privileged to live in places where we don't see it and don't smell it. And so not talking about it is no longer an option, because when you know better, you have to do better. And so I tend to go to that. And it generally gives people nowhere to go. I find that when people are saying it's too expensive to do, they're looking to pick a fight. They're looking to be combative, or they're looking to shut you down. I had an unfortunate incident when I'm on my planning board and I started talking about having an examination of where we are preserving open space in the town and looking at the 22 overburdened community census tracts that we have identified in our town. And I was accused of promoting segregation and not wanting to preserve open space in any of the white areas of town. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what I didn't say. And so, you know, needing to be very sure of what you're saying and work out these questions in advance. And that's what we're here for, to think those things through. So really, really great question.
Right, great, thank you. The next question. Yes.
If I can,
yes, please,
I just wanted to add one thing that's just pretty much a scientific fact to what both of these ladies have said.
Great.
There was a study that was done by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and they looked nationwide. And what it shows is that Black and brown people consume less, they inhale more pollution than they produce. It's the case for African Americans. It's the case for Latinos as well. And for whites, it is a pollution advantage because whites, looking nationwide, inhale 17% less pollution than they produce. So Blacks and Hispanics produce 56 to 63% more. They inhale more than they produce. And whites have the advantage with taking in 17% less air pollution than they produce. So I would say it would have to be an incredible paradigm shift for it to even be at the point that it would be considered reverse discrimination. Like Maria said, we're just trying to get it to the point really where it's just pretty much fair. Because it's pretty clear that right now, nationwide, systemically, it's not. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you so much for adding that in, that data. I'm interested in that paper, the reference, you get a chance, maybe not doing this, but okay. The next question is, what role is the state taking in tree planting and pocket parks in EJ communities? Or is any effort being taken to put trees in EJ communities or pocket parks in them? Because they're needed, that these local parks are a significant need. Is anything being done in EJ communities at all, in any of them? If
yes.
Not, okay.
Yes. So New Jersey has an urban and community forestry program that is pretty, it's pretty outstanding. And so what the program does is it works with municipalities and counties in doing inventories of trees that they have, taking care of the trees that they already have, and finding ways to get more trees in the communities. So they undertake some of those efforts themselves. They also give out grant monies to those respective municipalities to help them with what they have and also helping them to get more. And also they partner with organizations like the New Jersey Tree Foundation to do tree plantings in communities all around the state. So I would be happy, I'll find a URL of our urban and community forestry program and provide the name of our state's urban and community forester. Her name is Carrie Sargent, just in case anyone wants to reach out to her for any supports.
Thank you. The next question is, can an OBC be defined, overburden community, be defined by current concentration of polluting entities without reference to income, language, or minority populations?
So we're working under the umbrella of a law, and the law says that we had to start with those criteria. And it's not an unfounded criteria. There have been case studies that have been done over the course of decades all around the country that show that if you look at the demographics of a community, those demographics will tell you the likelihood that you will find those types of polluting facilities in a neighborhood. So that's across the country. And it's not just urban places. It's urban, it's suburban, it's rural, all across this country. So for us in New Jersey, we do have to begin with the data that's based on overburdened communities. What we're doing as a part of the rulemaking process is adding some additional GIS layers that identify environmental and public health stressors. So by the time we get to the point that this law is in effect with rules that have been adopted, there will also be a more robust mapping tool as well. So what you may have noticed with the Overburden Communities map that I showed you, the title of the map is Environmental Justice Mapping Tool. It's not just Overburden Community Mapping Tool, because it is our intention to continue to add on those layers of information. So you will be able to see if there are polluting facilities in your community. And certainly, of course, we're here to serve at DEP all 565 of New Jersey's municipalities. No question about that. But we definitely know that the disparities exist in those communities that tend to have the demographics of minority, low income, and limited English proficiency. But the tool will be there for anyone to see those stressors in your community, no matter where you live.
Thank you.
If I could just jump in there, because I
Yes.
think what I'm reading in that question when they say less urban municipality is that they're probably worried about the concentration of folks. But I want to remind everyone that the law actually is based on the census tract, and the census tracts are adjusted to try to fit roughly, more or less equal amounts of people. So when you're in a rural community, your census tract is much larger than it is, let's say, in a city like Newark that's densely populated and has a lot more census tracts. So I think, not to nerd out on anybody, but it's still, like obviously it's defined by race, language, income, but it's not urban. I don't know, like people read, oh, that must just apply to urban places, but no, like in a rural census tract, it's just a much larger geography that the census tract includes, so, not to, but I think I'm reading that into the question that might be a concern. I want to clarify it by the census tract thing. It's not saying the whole city or just an urban municipality. It's saying by census tract, which is for easier communities, we love it because it's the smallest unit of measurement that includes people.
Thank you. This question was directed to Maria. It might be because of your, being, part of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, but is Washington listening to this conversation? That was the question.
Are they? You tell me. Like first, I'm wondering. I'm realizing. You mean like just do they care about EJ, or are they listening right now? I hope they're not listening
I thought they're listening right now, but I don't know.
I'll take it to mean like, are they paying attention? I mean, Nikki and I are on it's the country's first time having a White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, right? Like previously we had, what was it? The NEJAC, right? Which was the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And that just advised EPA. What I like about the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, it's a little long named, is that it actually advises, what is it, 31 or 21, I'm really bad with numbers, agencies. And I mean, the agencies I care about are like HUD, Department of Labor, Department of Transportation, like there are more agencies than just the EPA that we're hoping to give guidance to. And actually this intersects with Olivia's work that she's been really pushing in New Jersey about how does this, like a whole of government approach. The White House is taking a whole government approach that New Jersey actually started with the EJ guidance, right? She was working with the New Jersey's Interagency Council, which is saying, what folks don't realize is environmental justice is not about just the environment. It's environment plus economics. We want a new future and we want to change the rules. And so that applies to everybody, HUD, like I said, all these other departments. And the White House is seeing that and prioritizing it right now, at least in the rhetoric. And we're going to see to give them a scorecard once they've had a chance to put things into action. So are they listening? Yes. This is a new whole of government approach. We're pretty high up there in terms of the ability to give some advice, but we're just advisory. I hope it all is worked out and worked through for the better of our communities across the country.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, have you been there yet, or has it been on Zoom? Just out of curiosity.
I am on Zoom very often. I am actually in a very high-profile internship where I do a lot of free work, and I'm constantly in meetings trying to hit my deadlines. So it's a lot of fun, but I haven't had to go to DC, and I don't really like to travel. So I'm hoping it stays that way for as long as possible.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, a portion of Colts Neck is considered low income. but that is because it includes Navy family housing. Surely it's not the intention of New Jersey to consider a Navy base as an overburdened community, is it? I mean, I know probably with the link that Olivia gave, you probably could look it up, but just off the top, what do you think, anyone? Yeah, I'll read it again. Would it consider Navy family housing as a overburdened, based on the criteria, Olivia, that you outlined? Would that be something that could be?
Yeah, I have to say, I do not know whether or not there are block groups within Colts Neck that are overburdened communities or not. But I will say to you that we certainly didn't look to disqualify any block groups if they happen to be parcels that have federal housing on them. So if it does meet the threshold where that's the demographics of the community, I don't think that we would exclude it. And if it happens to be the case, I just want to be sure that we're doing anything and everything that we can to serve those families who live in that block group as well. Thank
you. Next question is, and it's for Olivia. Are the EJ or the New Jersey legislators listening to this conversation already?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're very fortunate, like Maria mentioned in her remarks, the drafting of a bill. There has been a bill introduced in the Senate for a very long time for over 12 years. And so since it's a law at this point, yeah, our legislators had to all stand up and take a position this past summer and voted for its passage. I know there was one point this summer where it was supposed to be presented on the floor for full consideration, and it wasn't because they knew they didn't have enough votes. And so the work continued behind the scenes, like with some of our EJ advocates like Maria, working to make sure that it could actually happen and actually pass. And then when it came back around, they knew they had enough votes. It made it to the floor and it passed both houses of our legislature. So yes, our legislators have been very involved in this process with legislators from all across the state. So yes, they're definitely engaged.
Great, thank you. Next question. Recognizing how COVID has negatively affected many municipalities' tax revenue, how can ECs work with municipal leadership to keep environmental priorities up front when pressure to increase ratables and econ development?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure we all could take a swing at that. My first thought there is to understand the impacts. What are the stressors of the overburdened community? So Maria's talked about a lot in the Ironbound. Is it incinerators? Are we talking about landfills? Are you talking about digesters? Are you talking about flooding? Is it combined sewer overflows? And then reframe the conversation to talk about fairness. What we're talking about is trying to make decisions based on fairness and do that targeted to the issue. So it may mean looking at, I do a lot of water work, so my frame of reference tends to talk about and think about water. So if you are looking at an overburdened community that also has the compounding struggles of a combined sewer overflow, so you've got raw, untreated, laden sewage water running through the streets, pouring into basements when, I'm being facetious, but essentially the humidity gets too high. And you need to start thinking about how are you going to comprehensively deal with that. A conversation about a stormwater utility where you're talking about an equitable fee leveraged on an entire community. So you're looking at not just individual homeowners or row houses, but you're looking at what are the causes of the problem? Who own the big parking lots? Who own the big old buildings that are generating the stormwater that is running towards the overburdened communities? And so how do you get financing in place to create a structure that then can focus on remediation and treating stormwater management in that area? And so I would say understanding is the first question to what are the issues. Also, there is a data set that is going to come out under the NJ Pact regulations with the DEP New Jersey protecting against climate threats later this summer. And we are going to see a shift of our floodplains, a pretty massive shift throughout the state, where our current 100-year floodplain is going to look much like our existing 500-year floodplain. So our flood buffers are getting bigger faster, and it's happening now, and communities are struggling under it. And again, those are often the first and worst hit communities. And if we are not having a conversation about this, then it is not going to work out well for communities. It may not work out well anyway in every instance, but it is really not going to work out well if we don't have some kind of upfront conversation about the impacts that communities are suffering. So I'll shush and see if Maria has other ideas on that.
Yeah, I mean, I hear like there's folks often pit like environment versus the economics, right? And Newark, nowhere knows that better than Newark, right? Like Newark has been historically disinvested in. We went through white flight and money just left the city and no one wanted to give us a dime, right? So I understand my city when it struggles, and it's like, let's just put a warehouse, like, they need the tax ratables. I hate it. It's gonna drag thousands of trucks into the neighborhood, but I understand the difficult position that they're in, right? What I'm excited about what's happening at the federal level, so that's why I would encourage municipalities to pay attention, is we're having an infusion of federal dollars into our state like never before as a result, as a combination of terrible things and good things, right? Like terrible things like COVID, but good things also, like the American Jobs Plan has environmental justice at its core. Today at 10 a.m. they had a webinar on that centers EJ, and I'm proud to see a lot of my colleagues there of like, folks are finally starting together. And in this sense, a lot of the federal narrative is ahead of where New Jersey is. New Jersey's still like environment over there, maybe in the pine lands, preserve open space, urban areas, whatever you can get, warehouses, just get jobs and manufacturing going. But there is a way that you can have both, and you can have both better, where we can be improving, where actually the environmental priorities can be the economic driver. I'm scared of gentrification, of course, but it could be a driver to really up the profile of our cities, to bring in the types of jobs we want to see. Because at the end of the day, you might get the rateable, which is short-sighted. I really encourage municipalities, don't sell yourself short. New Jersey is perfectly positioned where we are geographically, of being right next to the mega capital that is New York City, to being next to other metropolitans, to be not far from Philadelphia. Goods have to move through New Jersey. New Jersey will always be desirable, so when folks want to develop, they're going to find a way. You can put the restrictions on so that you can have a healthy community and you can make your money. Don't put them at odds, because then you're selling yourself short.
Thank you. We have one last question for the night. And the question is, I've read that our tax dollars are subsidizing the Ironbound incinerators. If true, won't this be a violation of the EJ law?
They are not. So let me sparse these things out. We pay, when we pay our electric bill, we do pay into a broad fund that subsidizes renewable energy. Unfortunately, in New Jersey, and Ironbound is launching a campaign that I'll be reaching out to all of you for help, of course, right? But we've started, and you've heard us talk about it, about the problem with our dirty renewable energy portfolio, right? Because incinerators in 2004, unfortunately, Ironbound did not have the political capital we do today. We did not have the visibility. We're a neighborhood-based organization. It's incredible we've gotten to this moment, but we didn't have that in 2004. So us and many other communities, we lost. And incinerators, along with some other things that are harmful, but I would say incinerators is the worst, made it into our renewable energy portfolio stand, like for New Jersey. So they're considered tier 2. Solar and wind are tier 1. And then incineration and some other things like biomass and hydro, they're tier 2, I believe, right? Don't quote me on the others. I know mostly about incineration, but the world's changed. It's 2021, and we are hoping to get all of your help to kick out incineration, both on a state level, federally. We're also doing this work to kick out incineration, because renewable should be renewable. It shouldn't mean any emissions of any sort, definitely not lead, mercury, dioxin. But this has nothing to do with the EJ law. I want to keep those things separate, right? Like the EJ law pertains to permitting. And when we're talking about taxpayers subsidizing incineration, it's not really taxpayer money. It's actually ratepayer money. When you pay your electric bill, that's how you're subsidizing the incinerator. And obviously after COVID, we don't think that any ratepayer should be subsidizing asthma. And it's not just Ironbound. There's an incinerator in Newark, in Rahway, and in Camden, so all communities are EJ communities, and we hope, I'm not saying shut them down, but we definitely shouldn't be paying them our renewable energy tax credits, different things. So sparsing that out, and I wanted to protect the EJ law for me, because they're not that related.
Thank you. All right, so we're done with our questions. We're gonna stop the questions for the night. I thank all of you for participating, and for those that came and asked questions. Jen, I don't know if you want to close us out.
No, I just thank you. Really, bottom of my heart, thank you to our speakers for coming here today and sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. We really appreciate it, as we are on our journey with environmental commissioners to be better advocates, to be better allies, and to scale up the work on fairness and environmental justice, so that we can have a more equitable and fair New Jersey. So thank you. Thank you to everybody who attended tonight, spending a late summer evening with us. And I wish you all a happy, healthy rest of the summer, and be well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.